Welcome to Culture Shock, the podcast that explores the life of Canadians and celebrates the differences that make us who we are. Our aim is to introduce people to different cultures to promote understanding and connection. I'm your host, Karen Petgrave, and today we have with me Liz Evans, a registered social worker and a psychotherapist who helps families deal with the many changes they face throughout their life journey. In this episode, we're exploring the challenges and resources that families experience transitioning into life in Canada and how social determinants can impact whether they have success or not. So Liz, thank you so much for being with us right now. Can you share with me a little bit of your background, your education, your professional experience, and just your area of expertise overall?
So, as you mentioned, I'm a registered social worker and a psychotherapist. Oftentimes, those titles are interchangeable. For clarification, what the difference is the regulatory body. So, there are 5 regulatory bodies in Ontario who oversee the Controlled Act of Psychotherapy. So, I am under the College of Ontario Social Workers. So, I am a registered social worker. Which means that I am licensed to practice the Controlled Act of Psychotherapy. You may also hear the term registered psychotherapist, which just means that they are strictly under the psychotherapy regulatory body. So the bodies are just for oversight, support, best practice, evidence-based to oversee the profession. So I call myself a social worker. My background is community social work. That's what I come from. That's what I know. I joke that I'm in the streets. I'm in the on the boots on the ground social worker.
Nice.
My specialty, I would say, is with adolescents, tweens, and teens. I work for some of the big agencies in Ontario, CAMH, Canadian Mental Health Association, Central Toronto Youth Services. So that's kind of where I got my stripes, was through working with youth. Really, like I mentioned, community-based at-risk youth from marginalized backgrounds, racialized immigrants, substance use, mental health, just adverse childhood experiences, any things that cause youth to have struggles and their ability to thrive. So thrive could be school attendance, homelessness, justice involvement, and pretty much the gamut of challenges for youth.
Yeah. So with here at the Cultural Empowerment Project, we see a lot of that. And one of the things we have really worked towards, so a lot of our volunteers that we have are youth, and we find that a lot of them are new to Canada. And one of the things that we try to do is to kind of ease their experience coming into Canada. From your experience working with children and young adults who are transitioning to life in Canada, what are some common challenges that you feel that they face?
Well, one of the commonalities that we see is kind of this disconnect between the expectations of their culture, family, religion, ethnicity, while also desperately trying to assimilate and be welcomed and included. And it's not to say that they are not connected with their culture, but it's a real transitionary period. Adolescence is all about transition. So then to move countries, speaking for myself, I'm an immigrant. I moved to Canada when I was 13, grade 9, grade 8, grade 9, and real transitionary period of time in any 13-year-old girl's life. So I remember the challenge of being one person at school and then another person at home, because there was this almost judgment of, you're becoming too assimilated from home, but then not being fully included when you're at school.
Exactly.
So as I mentioned, my experience, I came to Durham Region, Oshawa, when there was maybe 5, 10 youth of color in my high school, and I came from a very diverse place. This was a real culture shock. And, a big, and I remember had a heavy accent, came from England, Black girl, and just feeling so out of control, like there wasn't much I could control, but I could control how I spoke. And people still say to me today, how come you don't have an accent? My sister is 4 years older than I am. She sounds like she just got off the boat.
Yeah,
Obviously, I sound like I sound. And that's the
yeah,
first thing people say is, how come you don't have an accent? My younger brother, 3 years younger than me, still has an accent, and I don't. And I said it was the only form of control. I practiced for hours at home in the mirror to lose this accent because I thought, I can't change my skin color, right?
yeah,
Can't change where I live, but I can
mm,
certainly control how I speak. And
yeah.
so for years I would speak one way at school and another way at home.
Oh.
And it still happens now, right? It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Friends will say,
Yeah,
oh my goodness, you sound so English when you're around your family or
yeah,
England. And it just
mhm,
comes back because it was a real forced um abruption, right? That I
yeah,
pulled away from it. And so just those instances happen in other ways with the youth that I see, just trying to find some way to control their circumstances. Immigration is
mhm,
not having any control,
yeah,
right? They're struggling. There may be a language barrier. And so then
exactly.
often a lot of youth I see are parentified because they have to speak the language for their parents. So they're paying bills and dealing with bank managers and um, having to go to stores or taking on these additional roles
Yeah.
because of language barriers. So, that in itself, parentification is an issue. Um,
Yes, I feel like that's a topic on its own. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your personal experience as well, because I know it's not easy. It kind of brings you back to that moment, right? Like when you were speaking, I felt that as you were talking about it, right?
uh,
So what type of strategies would you give for helping children, because a lot of children, this is the other aspect too, when we get into this transitioning to life in Canada, we could have that a child is coming to Canada to meet up with another birth parent, number one, or they might be coming to live with an aunt and an uncle, or they're just, it could be the whole family, right? There's
right,
different situations for each family. And you were talking about the whole parentification, where because the child may be in school, they're picking up on the language earlier than their
right,
parents. So
right.
what strategies would you give to parents towards helping their children in this
I
situation?
I think the biggest thing I do that I work with families is children adapt very quickly and they're able to assimilate to see how, how do I interact? How am I going to fit in here? A lot of the pressure comes from the parents not understanding the systems, not understanding school systems, legal systems, all of those external systems. Inadvertently, parents provide another layer of pressure to the child around expectations and also not understanding attachment theory and ruptures in attachment. It was well known. My mother is an example of was sent up from Jamaica to England to live with her older sister who was 17 years older, who had already gone to England and had major issues, developmental struggles, abuse, lots of things. And um the parents who have sent the children or are really wanting the children to adapt have given up so much, right? They
Mm-hmm.
spent their life savings or they've scraped or they've scrimped or they've begged this family member to take their child just to give their child. The intentions are always very noble, always very pure, not understanding what being wrenched from a warm, loving home environment put into basically you're an interloper. And this is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes an established system of maybe it's a parent who's remarried and they have children, and now you're the outlier and you maybe don't speak the language or you don't understand the customs. And so that results in behaviors. So now both parents, either the parent in Canada and the parent aside, are frustrated with the child for going, we've done everything to get you
Yeah.
here. Why can't you just follow the program? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my work is educating, psychoeducating the parents and the family member, the caregivers around what those ruptured attachments look like. It's trauma. Immigration is trauma. So all of our interactions have to be through a trauma-informed lens. And so
Yes.
it's really providing education to the caregivers that
Mm-hmm.
the behavior is information. It might look like just a behavior, but we have to look at what is the information that the behavior is trying to tell us. So really trying to get them to step back from this kid is bad, this kid is causing
Yes.
trouble in my house, to this kid has ruptured attachment. It has been traumatized by the immigration, regardless of the
Mm-hmm.
love and the intention. So giving the parents a different language and dialogue with how to approach the child's behavior if it's perceived as negative.
Mm-hmm. So when you say that, what it reminds me of, like the whole, follow me here for a little bit. So the social determinants such as race, gender, social economic impact, right? When you're talking about examining it outside, like of what the behavior is, for a lot of parents, the whole just psychology,
Mm,
even for the child to come forward and say anything is a huge thing, because a lot of the times they might be approached by a social worker, but even to get that child to say, I am, I'm not doing well,
right.
that in itself is hard. So like how do you think those things impact how um how a child, like transitioning to life in Canada, the race, for instance, gender, and like the social economic aspect, because it is truly different. Like I don't think people understand that it's not the same for all.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point around interventions, like how do you help them to cope, is giving them the language, like how to verbalize what they're going through, because they don't know, right? Depending on the age and the developmental stage of the child,
Yeah.
don't have the language. There's a huge amount of shame and pressure around, we've done everything to get you here, and now you're ruining everything, you're screwing it up. That is internalized as shame, as there is something wrong with me, because why wasn't I able to accept this gift and turn into this magical angel? So that's internalized as I'm a defect, there's something wrong. And so it's really giving both the children age appropriate language and
Mm-hmm.
also the caregivers the basic understandings of what this behavior could be trying to tell us, what they're trying to say. They don't have the words to say it. This is the only way to say, I'm not doing well. And so instead of
Mm-hmm.
reacting to the behavior, we're going to react to the deficit of what's going on for the child. So let's look at wraparound circle of care around what's
Mm-hmm.
happening in school. A language barrier doesn't mean learning difficulties.
No, no, exactly.
And when I talk about trauma informed, I approach the caregivers from a trauma informed lens as well, because we don't know where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on their experience, you have to approach that. They may be hugely traumatized as well, and are triggered by their child's behavior. So inadvertently, they're bouncing off each other, and they're not able to provide the support for their child because of their own history and their own trauma. So it's so important for systems to not look at the parents also as well as being deficit in their caregiving, but
Mm-hmm.
to really look at it from a different perspective of what are their needs, where are they coming from, and how do we approach this from a trauma informed lens, so that these caregivers are not labeled as resistant, as um, you know, what is the word I'm looking for? Non-compliant to
Mm-hmm.
Canadian systems, right? It's not that black and white. So we
No.
have to create nuances to go, this is a traumatized parent who's just struggling, trying to do the best they can. This is what they know. in order to curb this behavior. Let's give them the language, let's give them the skills to understand their own needs and then be able
Mhm.
to support their child.
Yeah, I also think too, it's definitely the approach, because in a lot of countries, having a call home from the school,
Mm,
that in itself is no child wants. And then
mhm.
on top of it, the parent hearing that their child isn't doing well, they're not understanding that it doesn't mean education wise. It means, like you said, they're dealing with so much. So what resources and or supports would you here in Oshawa, Durham region, and on a greater scale, like a lot of resources are also in Toronto. What resources are around that you tend to refer or give to families?
I'm a huge supporter and of the Women's Multicultural Center. They
Yes.
just have so many different resources. They do such good work from a multi-layered perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I really highly recommend, depending on the need, I recommend families reach out to them. There's also a new agency in Durham called Durham Family, it's DFCC, Durham Family Cultural Community. I'm sorry, I only know the acronym.
We'll check that out. We'll link
Yeah,
that.
but it's a grassroots organization that has just recently received quite a bit of funding through Trillium, and
Wow.
they are focused on doing groups, workshops for young girls, young boys, and specifically caregivers. So I've been
Awesome.
supporting them, creating some groups for anger management, any youth who have had justice involvement. They have free legal clinics if you need to get some legal advice. So they're one that I'm really excited about. They're relatively new.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about some of the difficulties when it comes to transitioning, but I'm sure you must have some really great success stories of families that you've helped and that you've seen were able to make the most of life in Canada. Because really, for a lot, like you said, a lot of the parents, a lot of families, this to them is the dream, is to
Mhm.
come to Canada and to make the best life for themselves. Like each of us
Right.
have our own personal experience, but you must have some really good success stories.
I have so many success stories, and I think the theme that runs through all of my success stories is collaboration. I have had the best outcomes when multiple collaterals or systems have come together and just gotten very creative and basically thrown the rule book out and just
Hmm.
really dialed into what are the needs of this youth, what are the needs of this family, and really gotten so creative, like, found money for um hair braiding workshops, or supported a youth to get his barber's license, and supported mom to go back to school and complete the forms to get OSAP, and just things that aren't necessarily our role or the system's role, but that was where the gap needed. So just really meeting the families and the youth where they're at. And I found that when we take off our hats and literally roll up our sleeves to just say, what do you need? I'm not going to come in and tell you what you need. You're going to tell me what you need.
Hmm.
Is
Yeah.
the best approach because they feel empowered and they feel supported and they feel collaborated and they feel like their way of doing things is valued as well. And
Yeah.
when I'm going to come in and
Exactly. Like they're part of the process. So
that's right.
one of the big things that I find as well is that the schools really do have play a large role. Like you shared your personal story earlier. So what role do you feel that rules and educators could play in helping young children or young adults who are coming into Canada?
I've had great success with some on-site social workers who have reached out to me. I may not have been on their traditional list of resources, but they've said, listen, this is what I'm seeing. I don't know what to do. I don't want to just apply the ABC of what I should. Can you give me some guidance? And I'm getting that more and more from they're the gatekeeper, right? The school
Mhm.
social workers, the admin, they're the first line of defense. So really empowering them, giving them the information. I try to go around at the beginning of the school year, meet as many of them as I can,
Mhm.
because it's not a traditional part of their care. So really just giving them access to me to say, if I can't do it, I can probably find you someone who can. And putting aside that box and just thinking outside of it has been really
Mhm.
important. And the other piece is um, not looking at immigration and culture as a deficit, but as a protective factor. Culture, family, ethnicity, religion, these are strengths. And for the longest time, they've been labeled as a problem. I've seen so many assessments come in, new immigrant, language barrier, right? SES, socioeconomic, and just if the language is just a negative connotation, I've had to go through 8 pages before I've gotten to
The reason, what's going
right,
on?
right. And so we're just now, and I'm so insistent about it when I'm teaching or when I'm writing reports around what you don't know where this report is going to go. You don't know how long it's going to follow this person or this family. People are going
Mhm.
to read it and they're going to form their judgments. You have to be mindful that we're not just labeling immigrant as a deficit. What can you pull from what they do have instead of looking at what they don't have? What can you pull from what they do have, right? What
Mhm.
systems are in place for this family that they've been using to manage and manage well before we
Yes.
come in and break it all down and tell them that everything they've been doing is not aligned with the Canadian system.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make, because just coming when you're transitioning to life in Canada or to life in a new country, just the plan to even get into a new country, this it's a long process. It's a lot of work. And like we spoke about earlier, you could be leaving family, friends, like you're leaving your whole way of life. So focusing on the positives
Mhm.
when like you get a write up. This is a family. What
Right.
are those positive things that we can pull from right away and kind of boost those positive things up? One of the things that I do see with a lot of volunteers, like for me, a lot of my volunteers are new Canadians. Today I had someone there, they've been in Canada for 5 months. They're from Dubai.
Right.
What can we do as community organizations when people come in? They might say, oh, I just today, I just came in 5 months ago. I am working, but I'm alone. And I've just been reaching out to volunteer to try to help with my English. So when I have someone come in like that, or it could be another organization, do you have any tips that could help with just making them feel at ease? There's a language barrier.
Asking them what they need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not making assumptions around, oh, go here, call this person. You need this resource. You should call that person. I think it's really important. They've lost a lot of autonomy throughout the process of immigration, right?
Yeah.
You lose your home, your friends, you're often losing your position, right? Like we know
Yes.
how many accountants, doctors, lawyers are coming here and now they've lost their status in the community and their position. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really important, I think, not to make assumptions around what people need or what you think they need or what they want. So asking them, what would be helpful? Like what are some gaps that you're missing right now? Is it the
Yeah.
social? Is it some help with credentials, right? That's a huge systemic barrier. This country should be ashamed. We are struggling for family doctors, and there are thousands upon thousands who cannot get credentialed in this country. It's a travesty.
Yeah. I've
So
often thought that it's
I'm a huge advocate around this. So, you know, again, asking what you need, it could be something as simple like I'm overwhelmed by this paperwork. Like, could you come with me to support me at this hearing for me to get, legitimized in Canada? Like
yeah.
giving them the autonomy to tell you what they need.
Yeah. It's like a
Think,
self-determined
yes. I-
way.
Absolutely.
yeah. I think that's one of the biggest pieces, even with dealing with children, it's getting them, making them feel empowered. So, you know what, thank you so much for coming on. You've given,
I could talk about this all day.
I, we will have you on again, because I
Yes.
mean, like I said earlier, she deals with people, just helping individuals through life's journey. This is just one part of what you do. So I'd like to thank you, Liz, for coming on and just sharing with us a little bit of some really great information. We'll make sure that any information that Liz does give us, we'll link that information below. And thank you very much. And yeah, you've been culture shocked.
Great work. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.